Now, 24 hours ago, the International Court of Justice ordered Israel to take action to prevent acts of genocide as it wages war against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. But the International Court of Justice stopped short of calling for an immediate ceasefire. Now, Israel says that it has the right to defend itself, and there are talks that are ongoing that have been brokered by Qatar. But the big question, of course, remains, when will this offensive end? Our next report gets you more details.
Israel must take measures within its power to prevent and punish the direct and public incitement to commit genocide in relation to the members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip.
The World Court on Friday ordering Israel to prevent acts of genocide against the Palestinians and do more to help civilians. It stopped short of ordering a ceasefire, though, as requested by South Africa. South Africa brought the case to the International Court of Justice earlier this month, asking it to grant emergency measures to halt the fighting. While the ruling denies Palestinian hopes of a binding order to pause fighting, it does represent a legal setback for Israel. Israel had hoped the case, brought under the Genocide Convention established in the ashes of the Holocaust, would be thrown out. Here's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu after the ruling.
Like every country, Israel has an inherent right to defend itself. The vile attempt to deny Israel this fundamental right is blatant discrimination against the Jewish state, and it was justly rejected. The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous, and decent people everywhere should reject it.
South Africa accuses Israel of state-led genocide in its offensive, which started after Hamas militants stormed into Israel, killing 1,200 people and kidnapping more than 240. Over 26,000 Palestinians have been killed and the majority of the population of 2.2 million displaced in a 3-month campaign of intense bombardment. Israel says it has acted in Gaza in self-defense against a foe that attacked first. As the war on the ground in Gaza enters a particularly destructive phase, the international community considers ways to quell the fighting. Mediated talks on a month-long truce that could see hostages freed in swaps for Palestinian prisoners in Israel have resumed.
Today, President Biden spoke with Qatari Emir Sheikh Al Thani and Egyptian President al-Sisi. As a matter of fact, that second call with President al-Sisi just wrapped up here a little bit ago, to discuss the latest developments in Israel and in Gaza, including our efforts to secure the release of all the hostages taken by Hamas.
On the last day of his diplomatic tour of the Middle East, UK Foreign Minister David Cameron said talks have made progress.
Because, of course, a pause would be great for hostages, good for aid, and we might be able to turn that into the sustainable ceasefire that we want without a return to fighting. That's what I've been in the region talking about, and I think we are making some progress.
Israel kept up its bombardment on the southern city of Khan Yunis, where it said intensive battles with Hamas fighters were taking place. The heaviest fighting in weeks is now in crowded areas, jammed with hundreds of thousands of people who fled from elsewhere. The enclave faces a humanitarian disaster as supplies of food, water, medicines and fuel run gravely low. Palestinians say Israel has blockaded hospitals, making it impossible for rescuers to reach the dead and wounded. Israel denies this and blames Hamas for harm to civilians for operating around medical centres, an accusation the fighters deny.
And to give us more perspective on this, we're being joined by Professor Glenn Deason, who's a professor of international relations at the University of Southeastern Norway. He's joining us live from Oslo. Now, Professor Deason, let me in fact begin by asking you this. There's a lot that's been spoken about this interim order that's been given by the ICJ. What is your reading of this order? Will Israel change its strategy in terms of what it is doing in the Gaza Strip?
Well, that's a great question. I think it's too soon to say. So far, it looks like the Israelis are quite defiant and said that this won't affect their war objectives or how they pursue them. I think so far it doesn't seem like there's much pushing towards any change. The United States has also been quite dismissive of this being a genocide, and also towards ceasefire overall. And I would say even the EU previously has said that they would support ceasefire, but only if Hamas first capitulate its arms and dissolve. So this is pretty much also support for the continued destruction of Palestine. So I think I don't think it will be on its own. It won't have that much impact. If you want pressure on Israel, it has to come from the United States, because this is also largely an American war. So I think that the ICJ might have limited impact. Of course, it makes it more difficult to support Israel, but also in the United States. Keep in mind, this is an election year, and 70% of Biden voters want ceasefire, and 50% see this as being a genocide. So it's not a good ticket to run on, genocide. So if Israel should change, it has to come from the United States.
Very interesting. Now, the South African side, they say that because the International Court of Justice in its interim ruling has said that Israel must do all it can to ensure that a genocide does not happen. At this moment as we speak, at least about 26,000 Palestinians have been killed in this war so far. More than 70% of those who have been killed happen to be young women and children. That is quite clear that Israel will have to change its intensity of the war. Do you see any kind of a change in terms of how Israel operates on the ground, or are we expecting to see more of the same here?
Well, I'm not sure what Israel could do. I think that they're more in a position where they see this is an issue of all or nothing, because after the slaughter in Gaza, there will be more pressure from the international community to resolve this issue by giving the Palestinians a state, something that Netanyahu, of course, very obviously opposes openly. So I think many see this as an opportunity. Now they can either cleanse Gaza by pushing them into Egypt, or killing, what they would consider a sufficient amount. But even so, a key problem would be even running up a West Bank as an apartheid. It could be very challenging after this conflict. So right. I think it would be difficult to turn now, given that they might perceive this as being an all or nothing situation.
All right. My final question to you, Professor Deason, is this: a few days back, there is this proposal for a 2-month military pause that reportedly has been floated by Israel, where it wants Hamas to release all Israeli hostages, which can be done in 3 or 4 phases. There will also be a release of Palestinian prisoners who at this moment are in Israeli prisons. And one of the interesting things that was suggested is that Israel would be willing to let the Hamas top leadership within Gaza to leave. Now, if Israel is fighting this war to go after the Hamas leadership and also the Hamas resistance movement there, how do you read this war that Israel at this moment is waging, if it is in a proposal that it has put forth, is willing to let Hamas go?
Well, I think that there would be, so far it looks like one of the more likely proposals to pass, but I think it would be very difficult because Hamas would consider itself a resistance movement towards, against Israeli occupation. So getting Hamas out of Gaza, I think it could be considered to be a form of capitulation. So I think it would be difficult, difficult to get through. So, and again, that's the key problem with this conflict. There's no feasible solutions on the table.
Right, absolutely, indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Professor Deason, for joining us from Oslo and getting us all those details there. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.